I will go ahead and share my screen. And I'm going to hit present so that, sorry, I've got a lot of buttons here. Okay, great.
Perfect.
All right. Well, good morning. It's great to see you all. I love being with Nebraska librarians, and I think it's a perfect day to have a conversation about the excellent work that we do. So thank you for coming to listen and participate in this discussion about our young readers. I want to start here just quickly sharing my core values with you, because I really do strive to embed these things throughout every conversation that I have about libraries. I value these opportunities to connect with librarians in the field, and I want to talk about our work in a way that hopefully by the end really reminds you of the incredible value of your work and leaves you feeling empowered to move forward in excellence. It's kind of my de facto mission here. There's always comfort knowing that whoever's talking to you has a plan. So here is the plan. So we'll talk for roughly an hour. And what I want to do first is really think about this definition of reluctant readers and explore some of the nuances that are in this group. And then I want to move into a discussion about understanding what drives reluctance. I think when we know why something occurs, that allows us to be empowered and move forward proactively in addressing something. And then last but not least, we're going to examine some strategies that we can use to compel our young readers and hopefully create or nurture enthusiasm for reading. Okay, I want to start first with a little discussion about why all of this matters. And I know we're all reading enthusiasts here, so certainly a bit of preaching to the choir, but this is really the question that lies at the heart of so much of our work. And while I know we know this answer intrinsically, it can get tricky when we have to specifically articulate why reading matters. So I want to start by offering a number. 43 million is the number of American adults with low literacy skills. That is 21% of adults in our country. And low literacy is, literacy is our ability to engage with information in a way that allows us to be responsible and engaged citizens in a nutshell. I want to reflect a little bit about what this really means. Literacy allows people to effectively participate in education and economy. And you have to think about all of the life experiences that are not available to those who are not literate when it comes to job prospects or acquiring information, even developing relationships. And what's more, literacy is necessary for functioning within society, when it comes to the basic acts of reading paperwork, signing your kids up for softball, negotiating employment applications. If you hope to contribute to society, serve on committees, responsibly vote, all the more do we need those literacy skills. And in a lot of cases, literacy is at the very heart of brainstorming, creativity, innovation, all of the things that we need to move our society forward. So knowing all of the doors that will be closed to folks who do not have strong foundation of literacy in place, we have really important work to do when it comes to developing those skills for our young people. It's critical that we invest in our future this way. Just a couple more things to think about. Obviously, we know that if you can read, you have potential for academic achievement. But reading is central to so many other developmental milestones. It's tied to social and emotional development, developing your work and study habits. Rich vocabularies give students tools to use as they figure out their own identity. And exploration of information is open to them when they have strong literacy skills. Critical thinking and problem solving skills are in short supply and high demand in just about every profession in our modern world. And so all of this is why this conversation about reading reluctance is so, so important. I'm not going to read through all of this word for word because I think you're getting the idea here. Every aspect of our life is touched by our ability to engage with words, and not just to develop vocabulary, but true comprehension. So, knowing why we're here for this conversation, let's talk about reluctant readers. And I want to talk specifically about how we define and talk about reluctant readers. Frankly, I think words are really important. We just talked about that. And if we truly believe this, we have to harness the power of words in how we label this group. The way that we frame this conversation sets the stage for how we are going to engage and plan and interact. I have a lot of conversations, specifically talking about leadership or even service design, where I like to look to the idea of appreciative inquiry to guide my work, to guide our work. The 5-second version of appreciative inquiry is be positive, see opportunities rather than obstacles, and capitalize on your strengths. I think we have the opportunity to use those concepts here. So let's just think about how reframing changes the game. What happens if we tell ourselves or someone else they can't do something? It will only take once, twice, maybe 3 times before we assume can't as part of our identity, can't do it. So if we refer to a group of students or a group of patrons or kids over and over and over again as being reluctant readers, it is not a surprise that they are then indeed reluctant and aren't interested in trying to improve or grow or develop. So let's look at even this slight reordering of words and how this changes things. One label, reluctant reader, this labels the individual. This is telling somebody what their identity is. Reading reluctantly labels a behavior. Behaviors are things that we can change. I don't know if any of you are fans of Brene Brown's work, but if you know anything about her, and she talks a lot about shame, reluctant reader, and assuming that as an identity, I think easily puts somebody on a path to feeling shame and all of the dysfunction that comes along with living in shame. So we want to be careful that we are not putting people on that path. But when we focus on the behavior change, now the conversation is drastically different, and it allows all of that room for growth and improvement. Just another example here. Struggling readers. This is another term that I see used a lot, versus developing readers. If you look at synonyms for struggle, you're going to find words like fight, battle, clash, hard, dark things. If you look at synonyms for develop, you'll find words like grow, evolve, mature, progress. Very empowering, positive words that change the conversation completely. This is another one that I really like, is striving readers, because striving, we make great efforts to achieve something. It adds an element of worthiness and virtue and valor to the initiative. So this is a term that I like to use when I'm talking about folks who have reluctance when it comes to reading, is that they're actually striving readers. This is a quote from an article that I read recently when I was combing through some of the literature, where it says, labels may harm reluctant readers at a time when they are most sensitive to those social comparisons with peers. And another one that I think is important is how we talk about ourselves really impacts the way that we are able to approach our difficult or challenging tasks. That internal dialogue is actually self-coaching. And so we want to make sure that we are giving our kids a positive internal dialogue so that they feel empowered rather than that they are, trying to work through struggle. I think it's really important that we also address the idea that, well, before we move on to that, I guess I just want to hear from you all. I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen. So in your experience, before we dive into this next section, what causes reluctance? Any thoughts? What is it that when you see patrons who are reluctant to read in your libraries, why? Why are they reluctant? Hi, Joy. And you're welcome to hop on the mic or put it in chat. They're not sure what they want to read. Mm-hmm.
For us, it's when we get the children that are kind of the middle school age, it's more of a peer pressure where other kids have been making fun of them for reading. So we have one family where the kids just read, and now all of a sudden they're not reading because people are calling them nerds because they read.
Yep. So that negative identity stereotypes associated with it. Interesting. Okay. May not read as fast as others. So maybe reading skill, fear of making mistakes, seeing the size of books and get nervous about reading that many pages. Yep. Okay. Yeah, that's really interesting. And I think all of this is really important because you have just demonstrated that striving readers or reading reluctance is not a one-size-fits-all formula. It happens for lots of different reasons, which means there is no one strategy approach that's going to really be the solution here. Okay. So now I got to get back to where we are here. Let's take a look at all of these categories. Oh, that didn't look good at all, does it? Okay, we'll just leave it like this. John Spencer wrote an article recently in which he kind of gave us 4 categories, which it really is exactly what you all just said when it comes to what drives reluctance. So you can see that lack of skill is certainly one of them. Reading is hard for some of our kids. We develop our literacy skills at different rates. And if it is hard, it is not enjoyable. And that makes it really, really difficult to continue to find enthusiasm for something. Moving over to the right, endurance is also one. And I think somebody's comment there in chat about the size of the books, that's really apropos. Attention span is short for kids. And I think especially these days when a lot of our kids, they are born and raised with constant stimulation. So more and more attention becomes a challenge. So we have to think about perhaps our expectations for giving kids the Harry Potter tome and expecting everybody to be really excited and enthusiastic about it. No connection, no joy, no reward. Reading is boring. Again, I think that speaks to what you all talked about with they can't find the right book. They don't know what to read. And why is it that they haven't found connection in those books? We know that when we read because we seek to see ourselves. We see other aspects of the world. Our sphere of focus is widened, those mirrors and windows, or we see something that's possible and it empowers us to go and do new things and have new experiences. And if books aren't hitting any of those targets for kids, there's no connection that's there. And then finally, of course, is the identity. I'm not a reader. And that can be driven by negative past reading experiences, or it can come from the fact that somebody told them that they're a nerd for wanting to read. So we have to be mindful of all of these things. The common ground across all of these things is that there are these negative associations attached to reading. And also they probably aren't signing up for summer reading if they have all of these negative associations attached to reading. And I know we're all in the summer reading mindset right now as you plan and think about all of that work that you do with kids this summer. So let's think about what our strategies are here. I'm going to try to present again and hope that works. Oh, yay, it did. What if we worry less about the reading and focus more on creating new and positive associations with reading? We in public libraries have the luxury, if you want to call it that, of not having to worry about assessment and curriculum. And so we live in this really special place where we can just focus on the joy and all of the wonder that's attached to reading. And we also can live in this place where we don't bring any pressure to the table when it comes to reading and our kiddos. And I think I want to talk a little bit about all of the great stuff that happens when you read that has nothing to do with reading. And so what if we also focus on creating new relationships with the whole process of consuming information? So yeah, maybe some of this is books and maybe some of this is other stuff. And maybe we need to just let go of some of the structure and tradition that we all came up with to think about how the information consumption process looks so different for our kids now. So if we go back to that reluctance breakdown, skills, endurance, attention, and identity, what we really want to think about is, okay, if we have somebody where foundational skill is truly the problem, literacy skills are not developed, we need to match skill and interest with the right resource. And you'll notice that I did not say book there, because I think for a lot of our kids, it's maybe not realistic to think that the book is going to be the right first step to engaging reluctance. Maybe it's reading the directions to build the Lego Death Star. Maybe that's the kind of reading that they need to focus on. Maybe it's reading the back of the cereal box to figure out whatever the riddle is. Maybe it's reading through whatever the campaign plan is for Dungeons and Dragons, because that's what they're really interested in. I think we have to step back and really figure out where our kids are and how they are engaging with story right now, and then figure out where we can add in the literacy component there. So if we think about endurance and the fact that attention easily wanders, talk to any kindergarten teacher who tried to teach on Zoom during the pandemic, and they will tell you how quickly attention wanders. What if we scaffold reading experiences? What if we give away the idea and we help caregivers give away the idea that they are going to have this book and their child is going to sit and read for 30 minutes, and then they're going to have a really meaningful conversation with you about you after that 30-minute reading session? What if we start counting 2 minutes here and there? And we really look for resources that allow bite-size sampling, maybe. When it comes to no connection, this could be its own conversation all on its own, and it should be, and I know it is in other spaces. This is where I think we have to ensure that we have collections that have all kinds of choices, where, yes, we absolutely embrace all of the wonderful aspects of DEAI there and ensure that representation is there for every kid who walks in our library needs a book, but that we also have lots of choices of formats when it comes to materials in our collection, so that it's not just chapter books that kids can engage with information in different ways and different mediums. Dismantling the negative identity might be the hardest piece of all. How do we help reshape those stereotypes? And I think this is really where librarian magic shines, because this is all about developing relationships with our readers and really getting to know what it is that excites our kids. So what is their identity? And if we can figure out, where those positive identities are, and then show the ties back to reading. You love sports, you love athletes. Here's 3 cool athletes who are wonderful champions for reading. We bring in members of the community with fun and exciting careers, firemen, policemen, to be reading with our kids and demonstrate that they think this is important too. But I think it really comes down to our conversations with getting to know these kids and helping them find their positive identity with us in this space. Take a minute to think about why we love reading, because I know we all love reading, but do you ever think about why you really love reading? I used to get to drive a bookmobile. It was the best job. I loved it. And I just am going to share a little story that took place one day on the bookmobile. One of my regular stops was a school in my community. And one day a kindergartner got on the bus, and his name is Frank, and he's a really sweet boy. And instead of thumbing through my picture books and my easy readers and my I Spy books, he walked right up to the very top shelf, which was where my adult materials were. And he pulled off a biography about JFK. Huge book full of pictures. And he said, "This is a book I want." Well, his teacher was on the bus with him, and she tried to talk him out of taking this book. It was not on the right shelf. And the volunteer who was on the bus that day helping manage the class tried to talk him out of taking this book. The principal got involved, and they had this big conversation about whether or not they should allow this kiddo to take this book. And so while all of the adults are having a meeting and wringing their hands over this, I sat down with Frank and I said, "This is a really good book. Why do you like it?" And he said, the picture of the guy on this book, he said, "He looks like my dad. My dad's in the Army and he's not home very much." My point is, Frank got to take that book home, and I'm so glad that that was the case. And my point is that his experience with that book had nothing to do with what he was able to comprehend from the words in that story. He was having an experience with that book that was all about the pictures that he could see and how he was associating those things with his own experiences in life. And honestly, Frank carried that book around for 3 solid weeks. And I think that we need to understand how important that experience was for Frank. What if we'd taken that book away from him? What if we'd said, "No, you can't take this book. This book isn't right for you." All of a sudden, the negative perception of that experience changes everything about how he views my bookmobile, all of the books that are there, and whether or not he can explore on his terms. And it's a small interaction, but it builds on a foundation. And so every opportunity that we have to strengthen that foundation is really important. So when you think about reading, what do you remember when you read in childhood? When I think back to my earliest reading experiences, I have almost a photographic memory of curling up next to my dad when he smoked his pipe and read the paper in the morning. I can still smell it. I feel the warmth of the summer breeze when I read outside underneath my lilac tree. I remember being under my covers until 3 a.m. trying to finish the latest Babysitter's Club book because it was so exciting. And what would have changed if we didn't have those experiences? Positive associations come from positive experiences. So that is our goal. Creating positive experiences, no matter what that looks like. All right, so let's talk through some of the tools that we have here. And Denise, I'm going to send you this PowerPoint. You can send it out after. All of these things that you see here are hyperlinked to lists and sources that I like. But if we think about all of those things that drive reluctance, attention, identity, no connection, lack of reading skills, where are our tools here? Everything that you see here actually hits on multiple categories. So book series are a big recommendation when we deal with recommended readers, because it's a continuation of a story that they're really engaged in. That also lessens the pressure when it comes to comprehension, because they're not having to use all of that heavy cognitive lifting to figure out the characters and figure out the setting. It's comfortable right from the start. So those huge series, and let me just tell you, when I saw the last Daisy Meadows fairy book leave my house, I was not sad, but I was grateful for those books because of how much my daughter loved them. And it was such a comfortable reading experience for her. I love movie book pairings. I think a lot of people feel like that's maybe cheating, but I don't see that it's cheating at all. And kids are so excited to think about how stories they love translate either direction. So we can capitalize on that in a lot of ways. It makes it fabulous and fun to have conversations to teach comparative analysis in a really low stakes way. Where, oh yeah, did you see the movie? What was different? And they can tell you and people have these really emotional reactions to that. Have you ever noticed that? People get really upset when they don't feel like a movie honored the book appropriately. Like somehow they've been personally wronged by it. But it's great because that's the emotional connection that we're looking for. And it can be a wonderful way to address that negative reading identity. And luckily, the entertainment industry is giving us so many options in this regard. And it's not just movies, but video games are huge too. And they are really complicated storylines. I really struggle sometimes to try to keep up with all that's happening in some of the video games that the kids that are in my life are really into. And I clearly lack the abilities to play them successfully, but I think there's another way where we can create a lot of important connections and just get excited about how kids are engaging with story, because that's all that is. It's just stories. Graphic novels are big. We're all still having conversations with parents as they tell us, no, I want my kids to check out real books. I want them to have quality literature. And so we have a lot of work to do, I think, in helping educate our caregivers mostly, that there are so many great things that happen for kids when they engage with graphic novels. Again, this allows kids, especially if they live in the category where the foundation of reading skills is not strong, but they are ready emotionally and cognitively for more sophisticated content. It's a great way to bridge that gap. It's also a great way to make the reading experience universal, because every kid gets excited about laughing over the ridiculousness of Diary of a Wimpy Kid, or some of the other really popular ones, New Kid, or of course my mind is failing me at this point, but when we get together, my readers and my non-readers are all excited about those graphic novels. High-low books, of course, are another good one, especially as we continue to think about our older, reluctant, striving readers. It's hard to reform habits. But then what I really want to focus on in here is this last category too, which is non-traditional formats. Novels in verse, and nonfiction. And I want to talk specifically about nonfiction because I'm a huge fan of how we can use nonfiction to, again, kind of make the reading experience universally fulfilling. These 5 categories, I just wanted to throw this in here before I talk more about nonfiction. these are the 5 categories that a committee that met through ALA came up with a few years back when they sat down and said, what are the really important things for reluctant readers to have in when they're thinking about books that might appeal? A really catchy title, a really engaging cover, an author that they know and trust, an opening chapter of a book that hooks them, and a book that they're willing to pass on and recommend. I mean, I don't know about the rest of y'all, but I was thinking, yeah, but this is what everybody wants in their books. I mean, most of us are drawn to these things in a book. So I think that's another important thing to think about here, is that reluctant readers minus reluctance are just readers. And a lot of our same readers advisory strategies apply. Okay, nonfiction. I love it. I never used to read it myself because I love fantasy and science fiction and mysteries and all of the sort of escapism benefits of reading. But I think that nonfiction, particularly with our young people, is really important and really powerful. Here are all of the kind of reasons, and there's more, but some of the big categories for the benefits of nonfiction. So starting at the top of this funnel, nonfiction and our ability to successfully negotiate those kinds of texts is a huge and important life skill. Teaching it early, if we get comfortable with a nonfiction format early, helps us develop skills that we will need and utilize for the rest of our lives. Knowing how to read a table of contents, understanding visual presentations of information like maps and diagrams and charts and graphs. Sooner we get comfortable with those things, the more fulfilling and successful our whole trajectory through school and the rest of adulthood looks. Next is that nonfiction is really universally accessible because you don't have to read a nonfiction book cover to cover in many cases, especially when we're looking at some of the materials written for children. You can read it in those bite-sized pieces, that sampling that I talked about earlier. You can read nonfiction, one page at a time. You can skim through and look at pictures and diagrams and still get a lot of great information. You can look back into your resources at the end, the references section, and just look for the topic that you are really wanting to know about. It's also built for skimming. All of these are important skills, and they take that pressure off of reading comprehension in a large amount, which can be really daunting when your foundational skill level is not strong. The visual aspect of nonfiction books is also incredible, and we have so many awesome choices. So I can hand a nonfiction book to a non-reader, a book about dinosaurs, a book about trucks, a book about magic, and they can have a very fulfilling experience with that book without really having to read a word of it, but still getting many, many benefits. I actually put this theory into practice back in the day when I was doing a lot of after-school programming, and I wanted to work specifically with kids in a boys and girls club, a lot of who had a lot of reluctance when it came to reading, lots of striving readers. And I knew that there was no chapter book that was going to work for these kids, especially because if I sent them home, they probably weren't going to come back, which is okay. But then it just wasn't going to work for the format of meeting every week and all of us having an engaging experience together. Also, I didn't have the same kids guaranteed every week. So what am I supposed to do? So I decided I needed to throw out this whole idea that we're going to have a book club that looks like a regular book club, and instead create an experience, a fulfilling experience that can take place during that 1 hour once a week. And if the kids change, that's fine, because the 1 hour benefits are contained right there. And we actually weren't even in the library, which opened up lots of possibilities as well. So what we did in that book club is I brought in piles and piles of nonfiction books that were incredibly visual and were about really appealing topics. And I did everything from gross science to magic tricks to creating paper airplanes, anything that would allow for and encourage a hands-on experience, and also allow kids to really manipulate those books, engage with them physically. Lots of these kids were boys in this club, really high energy. So we were on top of tables throwing paper airplanes across the room. We were doing terrible magic tricks for each other and laughing hysterically. But in order to do that, we were still getting all of those cognitive benefits as we were going through and reading directions and really conducting research and conducting experiments sometimes. And certainly there was lots of food involved, and we had music playing in the background, and everything about it, I wanted it to look and feel different from school, and from what felt like the pressure that's attached to reading and then getting tested. And it was really fun, and it was really rewarding, and it was not uncommon for an adult to walk by and say, "What is happening?" And everybody would say, "Book club." And they would say, "I wish book club looked like this when I was a kid." So, I mean, that's just a small example of how and why I'm such a big proponent of using nonfiction. All right, so I think we also have to be really mindful of how our kids are taking in and engaging with information on their own terms. The average teenager spends 7 to 9 hours a day on a screen, and that is not their schoolwork. I see a couple heads shaking. I know, I get it. I feel the same way. But I think we also have to acknowledge reality and then figure out where our opportunities are in that. Because if we just keep yelling at kids in the library, if our approach is you spend too much on the screen, well, that's not going to do any of our patrons any good when it comes to encouraging them to read and engage more. So, what do? And I think we have to be really mindful in trying to engage with them about the content in this space. So when we talk to kids about their experience with story, we have to ask them, all right, so what's your favorite YouTuber? And we need to be excited and engage with them about that. We need to engage with them about the video games that they play. And then we can look for ways to pair their enthusiasm over those things with the resources that we have too. My son is 11 and he has reading reluctance, which I'm like, are you my child? But he is, he's a really strong reader. It's not an issue with foundational skill. It's that he hasn't found the connected point, and the reading identity is a challenge. But he's really excited about Minecraft. So his favorite book, and one he will look over for hours, is the Minecraft Encyclopedia. Great. He's really excited about Legos. So I find every complicated Lego set that I can and offer those to him, because I know that he will spend hours engaging with that information consumption process. And he's also really excited about time and connection with his family. So incentivizing reading is one of the things that we talked about before. And we often think of incentivizing as like the crap fest from the dollar store, which, don't get me wrong, I'm a huge fan, but that's not necessarily what I'm talking about. Incentives, especially for kids, can also and are often experience-based. Time and connection with people that they really enjoy, whether that's their friends or the adults that they love in their lives. It can be pizza parties, it can be field trips. All of those things are really motivating. So for my son, I've had to give away the idea that he is going to sit and read right now. I'm trying to talk him into reading Scythe because it's an awesome book. He reads it with me and I read out loud to him for an hour every day, and he draws. because he can't just sit and listen. But if he has something else to manipulate at the time, he'll sit for hours. So, I think giving away some of the expectations that the traditional reading experience needs to look a certain way is a huge part of this. All of this means we have our own baggage that we have to give away with a lot of this. And that's easier said than done, but we just can't rely exclusively on those models from what worked for us or didn't work for us. Information consumption is so different. Our kids' attention spans look different. Their expectations for what's awesome and amazing look different. So thinking about how we can maybe encourage and count these non-traditional reading experiences, I think is important. And as we're rolling into summer reading, how can we embed this throughout our summer reading programs? Are we encouraging kids to listen to cool podcasts and counting those as reading minutes? Are we encouraging them to find a book about their favorite video game and play their video game for 30 minutes and then, pair that with some reading in this book? I think all of these things are opportunities for us to kind of change the game a little bit. All reading counts. All reading counts. If you look at research to support high skill, low interest readers, which is a special category, but applies especially to a lot of the boys that we work with. How do we do this? All reading counts. Cereal boxes, Lego instruction manuals, recipes, Minecraft encyclopedias, the graph. Yes, all of this stuff counts. And notice how many of these things allow for a physical experience to be part of it. And then that's really big, because now we're not just associating the wonderful imagination and all of those benefits that come with reading, but also all of the great true physical experiences that we've had. All of these things, when you're trying to think and you're talking to all of the caregivers in your life who say, I'm sorry, I can't do it. I don't understand why you tell me that it's okay for him to take this graphic novel, or that this book on dinosaurs is really good reading. We can talk to them about literacy and what literacy really means, and how engaging with information in all these different mediums supports different literacy development. It's not just about reading and writing. It's about being able to make choices when we're negotiating text on a screen. That's something that we didn't have to do when we were growing up, but it's a really important part of reading online articles, online research. We have to know how to negotiate the scientific process. We have to think about critical literacy and understanding what's good information and what's not authoritative information, and identify bias and how that plays into the information that we consume. All of these things are part of the literacy process, and all of them are supported through a lot of these non-traditional reading experiences. Information literacy breakdown, which many of you know, but just to kind of remind you, is to first recognize that you need information. Then you have to be able to locate that needed information, figure out whether or not it's good, valuable information. And then last but not least, use that information. And I want to take this one step further, because I'm so excited about the fact that in libraries, we are also talking about how we help encourage the creation of information and allowing people to be innovative. And that's incredible, and that is powerful. And it all requires excitement and enthusiasm when it comes to our relationship with information consumption. I already touched on this, but just that reminder that for our kids, for all of us, Books serve as mirrors in which we can see ourselves. They serve as windows into a world that's much bigger than our own sphere of reference, and sliding doors that empower us to move through them. So again, just that emphasis on developing collections that allow kids to have these experiences. I was really lucky in that I didn't struggle to find books in which I could really connect with the characters and the setting. But not every child has that experience. And if we don't have those options available to them, that changes everything. So attending to our collections to ensure that this is indeed the case is really important. And I know, going back to our conversation earlier, that can be something that requires some courage and bravery in our work right now, because people are challenging just about everything. And so being empowered to do this and being prepared and proactive in communicating the importance and the value of this to the people in our community is really, really important. Okay, it's summer reading time. And so here is, as I kind of close out my thoughts on all of this, kind of my summary of all of this and how we might really be mindful of all of this when we think about our summer reading planning. So first of all, we want to change our terminology. There are no reluctant readers. There is only a reluctance to read. These folks are striving for lots of different reasons, and your role is to empower them and give them lots of support and be cheerleaders for them as they do continue to strive. And I think really being mindful of trying to identify what it is that's driving that reluctance will help tremendously with that. We're going to celebrate all of those different types of literacy equally, and you can think about them as you design programming and as you think about supporting your collection. What kinds of different literacy is supported through your cookbooks and through your guidebooks and through your how-to manuals and all of those different kinds of books, your graphic novels, your audiobooks. And you're going to emphasize the reading experience and information consumption rather than just those reading cover to cover, that sort of traditional reading experience, flipping that model. I think when we can capitalize on our young people's preferred information consumption mediums, that gives us a lot of choice in thinking about how we interact with them and how we support them and how we help generate enthusiasm. And then we're going to ensure that we have excellent choice and that every kid has good representation present throughout the collections in our libraries. I think that's it. I think I have reached the end. There it is. There's the references slide right there. So I'm interested in, oh, now, see, I couldn't see the chat when I was sharing my screen before. So now I'm looking and there's lots of awesome stuff in here. Any questions or comments or experiences that you all have in this space to share for the good of the whole? That's great, Jenny. I hope you have fun. I think you'll have a lot of fun if you decide to give it a try. Well, as you have experiences with, oh, were you going to say something, Terry and Laura? No? Okay, sorry. No pressure. As you have those experiences with kids and who are striving, I would love to hear about them. I think I think there's so much benefit in sharing the experiences that we have and then relating them to the individuals that we're working with. And I always try to weave those in as I get to have opportunities to turn back to this conversation again and again. So I am actually going to put my email address in here, and I would love to hear from any of you about how all of this kind of shakes down for you in your libraries.
Well, I was right. You gave us a different way of thinking about things, because in the beginning, that's what I said. And you did. And I'm with Jenny. I think the nonfiction book club idea is terrific. Just let them figure it out. And like you say, get out those paper airplane books.
Yeah. It really, honestly, I think it is one of the, I do a lot of programs, but it was one of the most rewarding things that I have ever done. Because it really was so equalizing. And after a while, you'll notice they start bringing a friend, and that's like the best demonstration of success, right? When they're bringing a friend, you know that you've created something good.
It is that if they want to share it, and that that it's something they like. So that is, you gave us lots of great ideas right at the right time, because everybody's getting their programs together. So this was perfectly timed. I thank you so much.
Oh, my pleasure.
For agreeing to talk to us.
It is always a joy to get to come and talk to all of y'all. And so we did a webinar for ALA last week, and which was amazing. And there were hundreds of people there. But I said, oh, like, this is great, but it's so fun when I get to get online and it's like, hey, Joy, hey, Autumn, what's shaking? I know what's happening in your library. And I just love the community of these events. So I appreciate the invitation.
All righty. Well, you'll have one again.
Thanks, everybody. Take good care.
Thank you.
Thanks, Erica.
Bye-bye.